When I bought the old bankrupted ranch on the outskirts of Shield Creek, everyone in town looked at me like I had just purchased a cursed graveyard, not 600 acres of rolling fields, abandoned barns, and a crumbling farmhouse that had been sitting untouched. For nearly 6 years, the realtor practically begged me to sign the paperwork and take the property off their books, offering an unbelievable price that made me suspicious but also curious. How could a ranch this large, sitting on land so fertile that even years of neglect couldn't kill the wild grass, be sold for less than the cost of a used car? The rumors around town didn't help either. Some said the previous owners vanished overnight after some business problem. Others whispered about illegal operations. And a few joked teasingly that the land was haunted. But none of that mattered to me. After years of living in a cramped apartment in a noisy city and working a suffocating job I despised, all I wanted was peace, open skies, and a place where I could build a new life with my own hands. So I moved in with nothing but a truck full of tools, a generator, a dog named Ranger, and stubborn determination. My first week was quietly quiet, actually. No neighbors nearby, no road traffic, not even a proper cell signal. Just the wind brushing through the tall grass, the creaking of old barn doors, and the occasional distant howl from coyotes in the hills. It was peaceful, but in a way that almost felt too isolated, like the ranch was holding its breath. I spent my days clearing debris, repairing fences, cleaning out the farmhouse. Discovering hints of the previous owners, rushed departure plates still in cupboards, a broken picture frame upstairs, muddy boot prints leading to the back door. Every once in a while I got the unsettling feeling that I wasn't alone, not in the supernatural sense, but as if someone had been there before me recently. Tools in the shed looked oddly organized for a place that had supposedly been abandoned. Tire tracks near the northern fence line appeared too fresh for a 6-year vacancy. Ranger would randomly bark toward the woods, hackles raised, staring at something or someone I couldn't see. Still, I brushed it all off. Rural life has its quirks, I told myself. Shadows play tricks, animals roam freely, and memories cling to old structures like fog. But then, on the 7th night, everything changed. It started just after sunset. I had finished my work early and was sitting on the front porch with a cup of instant coffee, watching the horizon fade from orange to purple. The air was calm, the kind of stillness that wraps around you like a blanket. And then I heard the distant growl of engines. Not one. Several. My first thought was a convoy on the highway. But the sound grew louder, closer, and more deliberate. Echoing across the empty fields like thunder rolling over metal, Ranger stood up, ears pricked, tail stiff. He wasn't just alert, he was afraid. Headlights appeared in the darkness, moving fast. One truck came from the east road, another from the west trail, and 2 more from the dirt path behind the barns, as if they had been waiting for a signal. All 4 vehicles, a mix of matte black pickups and sand-colored utility trucks, converged on the main entrance gate, forming a blocked semicircle that trapped the only road leading into or out of the ranch. My heart slammed in my chest so hard I could hear it. None of the trucks had logos. None had plates. All had tinted windows. And all 4 left their engines running as men stepped out, thick boots hitting gravel. Doors slamming shut with sharp, deliberate force. They weren't locals. They didn't move like ranchers, farmers, or delivery drivers. These men moved like a unit, coordinated, confident, and completely unfazed by the fact that they had just surrounded a stranger's property at night. One of them approached the gate, gripping the metal bars like he owned the place. Another pointed a flashlight toward my house, the beam crawling across the porch, the walls, the windows, until it landed directly on me. Ranger growled low, stepping in front of my legs as if he could shield me. I forced myself to stand, adrenaline flooding every nerve, my mind racing with every possible explanation, none of them comforting. Trespassers, squatters, criminals from the ranch's past. Federal agents, or something far worse. The man at the gate leaned in, examining the locked chain as though he had seen it before. Then he looked at me, his face half hidden under a cap, and yelled in a voice that carried across the field like a command rather than a request. "You not supposed to be here?" The words hit me like a punch. They weren't asked. They were stated like a fact he believed more than I did. My throat went dry. "I own this ranch," I called back, trying to steady my voice. "Not anymore," he replied coldly. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my new property, and my safety shattered. For a long moment, I just stood there on the porch, frozen between fight and flight, staring across the dark field at the 4 trucks that had surrounded my gate like they were sealing off a battlefield rather than visiting a ranch. The man who had spoken didn't move. His confidence made it clear he believed every word he said and expected me to believe it too. Ranger kept growling at my feet, pacing back and forth, sensing the threat long before my brain could fully process it. My instinct screamed at me to go back inside, lock the doors, and grab the rifle I hadn't even unpacked yet. But a stronger instinct, the kind that rises when someone tries to take what you've fought for, rooted me to the ground. I wasn't about to let 4 uninvited strangers intimidate me on land I legally owned. But nothing about their behavior felt random. Their trucks weren't work vehicles. They were tactical. Their clothing wasn't farm gear. It was uniform enough to signal affiliation without displaying symbols. They didn't arrive drifting in by chance. They converged with purpose, each from a different direction, as if the ranch had been under surveillance long before I arrived. The man at the gate lifted a handheld radio to his mouth and murmured something too quiet for me to hear. Then he pointed directly at my house. 2 of the other men began walking toward the side fence, testing the perimeter like they knew exactly where the weak points were. My heart hammered harder with every step they took. They weren't here to talk. They were here to enter. "I'm calling the sheriff," I yelled, even though I knew the cell signal out here barely loaded a weather report. The man closest to the gate let out a humorless laugh. "Good luck," he shouted back. "We tried that sheriff for years. He doesn't come here." The casual certainty in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. Suddenly, every rumor I had brushed off, the mysterious abandonment, the rushed departure, the strange items left behind, felt much less like rural folklore, and much more like warnings I had been too naive to understand. I reached into my pocket to try the phone anyway, and just as expected, the screen flashed no service. The man saw the gesture and smirked. "Told you." He stepped closer to the gate, gripping the chain. "Open it." That set off every alarm bell in my body. "Not a chance," I said. "State your business or get off my property." He paused, eyes narrowing. "You really don't know, do you?" Behind him, the men at the side fence started pulling something out of their truck bed, a set of heavy pneumatic cutters that could slice through steel like butter. My breath caught. I didn't have minutes, I had seconds. Every survival instinct I had buried under city life roared awake. I ducked back into the house, shutting the door just as Ranger barked sharply and pressed against it, blocked it, shoved a chair under the knob, and sprinted for the hallway closet where my supplies were still in bins. Through the window I could see their silhouettes, moving shadows creeping along the fence line, working fast and quietly. These men had done this before. I tore open the bin, hands shaking, and rummaged through tools and gear until I found a flare gun meant for emergencies on hikes, not standoffs with strangers. But it would draw attention. And attention was exactly what they didn't want. I snatched it, grabbed my flashlight, and ran upstairs to the old bedroom with the broken window overlooking the front gate. Yes. As I peered through the cracked glass, the man at the gate signaled the others. A few seconds later, I heard the snap of metal breaking. My fence had been breached. "Ranger, stay," I whispered, even though the dog was already pacing, barking, desperate to defend the house. I took a deep breath, aimed the flare gun out the window, fired straight into the sky, and watched as a blinding red streak ignited the night like a firework. The ranch lit up in a blood-red glow, scattering shadows and painting the men in harsh outlines. They reacted instantly. One of them cursed, another ducked. And the man at the gate spun around and yelled, "Damn it, he's signaling!" Good. That meant the flare was working. Either someone in town would see it, or it would at least throw off their timeline. But it also meant they would escalate hard and quickly. The man nearest the broken fence pointed toward the house. "Move in, we're done waiting." All 4 men began rushing toward the property, their boots pounding against dirt like a coordinated strike team. I stumbled away from the window, my pulse thundering in my ears. There was no way I could hold them off. The farmhouse was old, the doors flimsy, and I was one person against 4 trained intruders. I ran downstairs, grabbed my dog by the collar, and shoved us both into the small pantry under the stairs. I slammed the door, clicked the latch, and held Ranger close as footsteps approached the porch. The boards groaned under their weight. I could hear them trying the knob. Then the sound of metal clanking, the chair being pushed aside. One of them pushed the door with his shoulder. The hinges strained, and a voice low, annoyed, and too close spoke through the wood. "We're not here to hurt you. We just need what's ours." The door shuddered under a heavy kick. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ranger whimpered softly, trembling against my chest. "You're trespassing," I shouted, even though the trembling in my voice betrayed me. "You don't own anything here?" Silence followed for a moment. Then the same voice replied, almost calmly, "Kid, you bought a ranch that wasn't supposed to be sold." Another kick. Harder. The frame cracked. And that's when I realized whatever the previous owners had left behind, whatever had driven them to flee in the middle of the night, these men believed it still belonged to them, and they were willing to take it back by force. The moment the door cracked under the relentless force of the intruder's kicks, a wave of panic surged through me, but I couldn't let it paralyze me. Ranger growled and tried to lunge, but I held him back, feeling the weight of the situation crash down in waves so sharp they left me momentarily breathless. My mind raced through every scenario I had ever imagined when fantasizing about buying a ranch in solitude. But none of them had included 4 armed men descending on the property like a predatory swarm at night. I realized quickly that calling for help was useless. No signal, no neighbors, no immediate law enforcement. The only advantage I had was the house itself, old, dilapidated, and unpredictable. Its creaking floorboards, loose panels, and hidden nooks were weaknesses that could become strategic advantages if I used them correctly. I grabbed a small hatchet from a kitchen drawer and quietly edged toward the stairs, where the main entrance had already begun to give way under repeated force. Dust fell like snow from the ceiling as I climbed cautiously, scanning the dimly lit living room for options. The men were inside now, their presence filling the space with a cold, methodical energy. Boots slammed against wood, voices low but assertive, coordinating silently like a military unit trained in intimidation. I ducked behind the broken sofa, chest pounding, and tried to calm Ranger, who was now whimpering nervously, but still alert. The smell of gun oil, sweat, and metal hung in the air, subtle but distinct. And every fiber of my being screamed that they weren't just here for intimidation. They were here to reclaim something tangible, something valuable that I had no knowledge of. Glanced toward the old staircase, realizing it could serve as both a barricade and a trap. The steps groaned ominously under my weight as I positioned myself, waiting for the right moment. The men spread out, sweeping the house, their flashlights stabbing through the darkness and revealing glimpses of their tactical vests, masks, and determined expressions. One of them paused, scanning the second floor, and I held my breath, praying he wouldn't notice the slight flicker of movement behind the broken curtain. Then, from somewhere below, a loud crash echoed through the house, as if one of them had kicked over a piece of furniture. My heart raced. I knew that if they discovered my hiding spot, there would be no negotiation. The thought of confrontation terrified me, but my survival instincts screamed louder. I moved silently to a small back window, cracked open the rotten frame, and peered out at the yard bathed in the red glow of the flare still smoldering in the distance. The trucks were parked like sentinels, and the men were scanning the perimeter, but none were looking up yet. If I could make it outside unnoticed, perhaps I could escape or find leverage. My fingers brushed the edge of the window, gripping the wooden sill, when suddenly a shadow fell across the lawn. Too fast, too deliberate. One of the intruders had climbed the side of the porch, moving with alarming agility, stopped right beneath me, looking up. My pulse skyrocketed. He didn't shout or signal, just stood there, a dark silhouette under the dim porch light, waiting, watching, calculating. I ducked back, heart hammering against my ribcage, and scrambled to the attic ladder I had noticed earlier. It was flimsy, covered in cobwebs, but it led to the small loft above the main living room, a tight space. Almost more a crawl area than a proper attic, but it would provide temporary cover and a vantage point. I climbed slowly, every movement deliberate to avoid the floorboards below, and settled into the corner where the shadows would conceal me. Ranger followed, whining softly but obediently. From our elevated position, I could see the men searching methodically, overturning furniture, prying open drawers, and moving with a precision that suggested prior knowledge of the property layout. Every second stretched into an eternity. It became clear that these men weren't just trespassers, they were executing a retrieval operation. Their every movement, Every calculated sweep hinted that the ranch held secrets, perhaps from the previous owners that they were desperate to reclaim. I caught sight of the man who had first confronted me at the gate. He paused near the staircase, glanced up, and muttered something to his colleagues. I couldn't hear it, but the gesture was unmistakable. They were coordinating, confident that they controlled the situation. And yet, I had one advantage they didn't expect: the element of unpredictability. I could see the broken banister, the weakened floorboards, the old chimney flue. They had underestimated the age and decay of the house. I had lived here a week, studied every flaw, memorized every unstable panel, and now those flaws could become weapons. I grabbed a length of rope from the loft and tied it securely to a beam overhead, fashioning a makeshift trip line for the intruders below. My hands shook, but the cold efficiency of necessity replaced fear with purpose. Every creak, every groan of the old wood could now be an alarm or a trap. Ranger's ears twitched as he sensed the tension, and I whispered commands to him, practicing coordination instinctively. Time was slipping away. The men were getting closer, their voices muffled but determined. I could hear them discussing in low tones the package they needed to retrieve, the urgency unmistakable in their dialogue. It became evident that this was more than a property dispute. This was a mission, and I had inadvertently stepped into its path. I had no choice but to become an active participant to leverage the knowledge of this house, the isolation of this land, and the few tools I had at my disposal to survive and protect what, at the moment, was not just property, but my life. As I prepared to spring my first trap, the adrenaline and fear fused into a singular focus. Outsmart them, survive the night, and uncover the truth behind the ranch, the mysterious trucks, and the men who believed they had a rightful claim over a property I had just legally purchased. And in that moment, surrounded by shadows, the sounds of shuffling boots, and Ranger's low growl, I realized that this quiet, abandoned ranch was no longer a haven. It had become a battleground. The final confrontation began almost without warning. A tense crescendo of movement, sound, and instinct that left my pulse hammering in a rhythm that matched every footstep below. From my vantage point in the attic loft, I could see the intruders spread throughout the main floor, flashlights cutting swaths of light through the gloom, bouncing off walls and revealing glimpses of their dark, methodical presence. Every movement they made was deliberate. Every pause was calculated. I realized then that these men weren't ordinary criminals or opportunists. They were professionals, trained to retrieve something with precision, leaving no room for error or escape. But they didn't know me. They didn't know how well I understood every weakness, every flaw, every hidden angle of this old ranch house. I gripped Ranger tightly as he bristled beside me, the tension between fear and readiness almost unbearable. The first opportunity came when one of the intruders ventured near the center of the room, stepping over the trip line I had set with the rope tied to the overhead beam. The rope caught his foot, and he stumbled forward with a grunt, crashing into the floorboards in a way that sent splinters flying and drew the attention of his companions. Shouts erupted immediately, and the intruders converged on the sound, momentarily distracted from their methodical sweep. That distraction was my chance. I grabbed a heavy iron lantern from a nearby shelf, swung it down with all my strength, and struck the wooden railing of the staircase below, causing the already weakened structure to splinter and collapse under the weight of two men who had been advancing toward the stairs. Their yells echoed through the ranch, reverberating off the walls like a chaotic drumbeat, and the others hesitated, unsure whether to charge, retreat, or regroup. I took a deep breath, knowing I had only moments before they realized exactly where I was. I leaned out of the loft, hurling small tools and debris to create confusion. Each clatter and crash strategically aimed at drawing attention away from the loft. Ranger barked sharply, leaping at a shadow on the floor, and the coordination between us, one instinctive, one learned through loyalty, gave me a fleeting upper hand. They were trained, yes, but they were not infallible. One by one, I forced them to underestimate the house, underestimate the decay and unpredictability of its structure, and underestimate me. The intruders began shouting, their communication fragmented, panic subtly creeping into their coordinated movements. And then I remembered something I had stumbled across days earlier, a hidden cellar door beneath the rug in the kitchen, almost invisible unless you knew it was there. The moment presented itself. One man approached the kitchen to investigate the noise, unaware of the concealed descent below. I yanked the rope again, tripping him into the hatch. The sound of his fall, along with a series of curses, sent the remaining 3 men into momentary confusion. I realized that brute strength and aggression were not enough to overpower me. This night demanded cunning, patience, and the intimate knowledge of a property I had already begun to call home. I moved carefully, climbing down from the loft and navigating the shadows with Ranger at my side, improvising traps and leveraging the environment to force the intruders into positions where their advantages were neutralized. One by one, they were slowed, disoriented, and finally separated. Each encounter escalating the tension while giving me critical information about who they were and what they wanted. Their conversations, clipped and professional, hinted at a hidden cache somewhere on the property, something that had made the previous owners leave in haste. Something worth sending for trained men to reclaim. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the history of the ranch, the disappearances, and the sudden bankruptcy that had made me the new owner. Every instinct told me that survival depended on more than just defending the house. I needed to uncover the truth of what they were after. Hours seemed to stretch into eternities, the moonlight barely illuminating the field outside as I moved silently through the rooms. Always aware of the sounds of boots, the sharp whispers, the creak of splintered wood. Ranger's growls were my constant companion, a reminder that while fear was present, courage and strategy could prevail. Finally, after what felt like an endless night of cat and mouse, I cornered the last intruder near the old barn, where remnants of the previous owner's life-rusted tools abandoned barrels. Stacks of old wooden crates provided cover and leverage. Using shadows, silence, and a final improvisation with a rope and pulley system I rigged earlier, I managed to subdue him just as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon. The red glow of the morning sun illuminated the aftermath, scattered debris, broken floorboards, and 4 men who had underestimated a solitary rancher with nothing but instinct, determination, and a loyal dog. I called the authorities as soon as cell service returned, explaining the situation, the trespass, and the threat, and by the time help arrived, the intruders were contained, the property secured, and the reality of the night's events began to sink in. Exhausted, I walked through the ranch, surveying the damage, but also noting the strange satisfaction that came with defending not just property, but life, history, and the right to start anew. And though the quiet of the ranch had been shattered, replaced by the echoes of conflict, I understood something profound. This land, once abandoned and feared, was now a testament to resilience. A place where vigilance and courage could turn the tide against even the most relentless of threats, and where secrets, long buried, could no longer control the lives of those bold enough to claim what was rightfully theirs.